Hey everyone, Sayre Nova Motorcycles again. This week we have a 1971 Norton Commando. This was, I think it was a roadster at first. It doesn't have the tank and seat on it, obviously. Roadster refers to the trim package that came as roadsters, that came as interstates, that came as fastbacks, as well as high riders later on. Different trim packages, seats, tanks, handlebars, stuff like that. This one is, well, let's talk about the Commando for a minute. The Commando is a really interesting bike, one of my favorites of the 70s, I'd say. You know, as we mentioned, if you watched last week where we talk about the 73 Triumph, this era of motorcycling was pivotal. Japanese were really taking over, beating the Americans and the British at their own game of big bikes. So the British were scrambling and doing all sorts of stuff to try to keep up. As we mentioned last week, the Triumph introduced a different frame. They introduced a 5-speed gearbox, an amazing thing. What Norton did is a little more innovative, I'd say. They also made their own frame, but they rubber-mounted the motor. They developed the first rubber-mounted motorcycle engine. They call it the Isolastic system. And what it allowed them to do is eliminate the vibrations, which caused Brit bikes to, do all sorts of crazy things like crack fenders, crack all sorts of pieces, spontaneously drop lights, and all sorts of fun stuff that Brit bike owners know and love. It isolated that, so the frame was free to bounce. The motor was free to bounce on its own. When they were able to let the motor kind of, not have vibrations be as much of an issue, it also allowed them to tune the motor more. So this thing started out in life as a 750 Atlas motor, rigid mounted, low compression, probably about 40 horsepower. And when it got into here, it became a 52 horsepower thing, higher compression pistons, hotter camshafts, able to rev a little bit more. And really kind of tweak the performance of it. So it could keep up with, say, a Honda 750 or a Kawasaki KZ900 for a minute. But it could keep up with a Honda 750 for a while. It really, it made it into the category of super bikes that were getting big at the late 60s, early 70s. So I love these things. They're really interesting, a very esoteric bike as far as I'm concerned. And they're sort of the three big Brit stuff, they're the nicer ones. They're the Cadillac versus the Chevy Ford of the Triumph BSA. So this one in particular, the customer has an interesting request. He has limited use of his right hand, and so he's able to ride. He's able to grab a throttle, but he can't grab the front brake. Strangely, we have another customer who has the same thing, and they've gotten around it. They're in their own ways. So we've brainstormed with this guy and said, hey, we have some ideas, but let's talk about what we're going to do here. So what we've settled on for now as a first stab. You see here, this has a drum brake. This was the last year drum brake for the Commando. We're going to put a later disc brake front end, which will allow the use of a hydraulic line, so we can put the master cylinder anywhere we want. So what we're going to do is put a left-handed master cylinder on the left side of the handlebar up here, and stagger it with the clutch, so he'll be able to switch between the clutch and the brake as needed. Probably going to be a little awkward to get used to, and we may end up we've also discussed the idea of actually linking the front and the rear brakes, putting a rear hydraulic system in as well, and just using one pedal that links the two. But in discussing that, as A, that would be a lot more complicated, and B, he really likes, like we all do, as a motorcyclist, having the brakes delinked is nice. You can control the rear, you can control the front. So we're gonna do that, and then the rest of the bike is going to have a mild build on it, just a little bit of a scrambler feel. He's already got a tank that it's a P11 kind of looking tank on it. There's a Norton scrambler kind of tank on it, and a seat from a BSA that actually fits really perfectly. So I think we're going to keep that stuff. Put a little knobby tire on it, dirt bike kind of handlebar with a cross brace. The rule I said going into this is we're not going to cut anything. We're not going to make this so you can't go back to stock. We're not going to do any mods that can't be undone, because these bikes are beautiful, and there's not that many of them. I mean, there's a lot of them still, but the more you cut, the more you make them irreturnable. It's just not a good thing to do to a bike like this, in my opinion. So yeah, in the end, it's going to be at first glance, it's going to be a normal looking, mildly customized Commando scrambler. But when you look closer, you'll realize that it has a really interesting braking system. So stay tuned, see what we come up with, and maybe we can get some footage of the guy riding it when we're all done. Yeah, as usual, please like and subscribe. Stay tuned, and thanks for watching.